we were prepared for the tax collector, and all our stuff was on the floor of the living room and the corridor and wherever. And they came in and they laughed, and we couldn't see any humor in the whole affair. And he says, look, to the other 6, this shoe pick made it easy for us. She already pulled it out of the cabinets, and we don't have to do that to smash up their crystal and their china. And my mother, usually a very timid, quiet soul, where she got the presence of mind, she didn't know and we didn't know. She says, wait a minute, I got to show you something. And she brought out our affidavit, which was in English, and it was very official looking, of course, and she held it under the nose of the Nazi leader, and she says, you see, it says here, the family Wasserman and all their belongings are now under the protection of the American Council and the American government, and if you harm or destroy anything, you will get into big trouble. And she was re-emphasizing the fact that if they do anything, they would get into trouble. And they discussed it amongst themselves. And the leader said, okay, let's go. We have still hundreds of Jew houses to smash up. And they left. And we were one of the few houses in Nuremberg that weren't Jewish houses, that weren't destroyed and broken. The reason you have all this stuff laid out is because you got to pay tax on everything for the privilege of taking out your stuff, and then you pay a head tax on the family for the privilege of leaving Germany. You can't wipe out every German as a bad German. There were some who felt they wanted to do something, but were afraid. It was your livelihood and your life. And this customer was a friend of my father as well. They'd been, I don't know whether they went to school together or what, but he came at night because you couldn't buy from a Jew anymore, do business with it, in his uniform with candy for us, and he would give my father the order for the next season, which was saving, because he couldn't go to most of the customers. And when we went for the first time to Germany for a rededication of the Jewish cemetery in Fürth, I really was sort of mad at myself having returned it. Didn't think it was so important. And as we walked down the street, we came by a shoe store with the name Perlman, and Mr. Perlman was the one with the order. And on the spur of the moment, and I think just to make myself feel better, I went in and I asked if there is a Mr. Perlman, and a young man came up and he said his name was Eric Perlman. And I introduced myself, and I told him the story of his grandfather. And it had the most unbelievable reaction. He started to cry. He said, you have no idea what it means to me to know that my grandfather was one of the good Germans who at least tried to help. Please come home and tell it to my children. So maybe they wind up like their grandfather. We couldn't, we had other engagements. But hopefully the image of their grandfather, in spite of the danger he was to do that, I think might lead him in the right path. And whenever I talk to children, they say, well, didn't you just fly or come by boat? Well, it wasn't quite that easy. First of all, you had to get an affidavit by an American citizen who was willing to be your affidavit giver that you could come and live here. Now, you think, okay, you sign a little piece of paper. Well, you signed a piece of paper, but it said there that Mrs. Longstaff, who gave our family the affidavit, was responsible for our well-being, or just our being here, and would, if my father couldn't get a job, she would send some money, or if my mother would get sick and we wouldn't have enough insurance, she would have to make up for the difference. And the thing to remember is, this was before Social Security, before Medicare, before Medicaid, before any kind of organized aid if you didn't sustain yourself. And, you know, it's quite a job to undertake sponsoring a family with this responsibility. So you couldn't find any affidavit giver at all easy. And there was a joke going around in Germany. What is the book that all the German Jews are reading? And the answer was the New York telephone book, because they were looking, if your name was Levy, you were looking at the Levies and you wrote. And sometimes it worked, and most of the time it didn't.